what's the capability of it. Yeah, so with that, let's go ahead and get this started. So good afternoon. I'm used to saying good morning on these. My name is Will McPhee, President of System Support, managed IT service provider out of Marshfield, Massachusetts. So today, like a lot of tech companies, AI is the hot topic, and a little bit inspired by some recent hikes. I wanted to have some field notes for helping Massachusetts and South Shore businesses navigating AI here in 2026. I think it's important to put a date on these type of things because things change so quickly that we want to see where some of these use cases for AI, and also it'll be handy to see 6 months, a year, 18 months down the road, how do things rapidly change from what we have here, or are there certain principles that are consistent? We have to keep hitting. So let's go ahead and move to the trail map that we're going to move through 7 steps. Yes, more than three. Seven's a nice prime number. So 7 steps we have here are the promise of AI, reality of the situation, what does success look like, few case studies, secret to a successful implementation, the champion, burying the lead a little bit there, the actual field test, and then getting that first win. So we're going to take this conflicting AI story of, oh my God, there's so much promise, or I tried it and there's a promise and then it sucked, or is it actually going to save me money? Is it going to cost me money? But then really kind of bring it down to earth for choosing the projects, finding champions, putting guardrails that things don't get out of hand, and then deciding those next key steps. So, big nod to my favorite blog, The Knowledge Project, or Farnham Street rather, where one of the mental models is that the map is not the territory, meaning that, there's so much resolution that gets lost between that map that you have versus the reality of it. It's something could look like, hey, this is a really steep, aggressive section. Is it a staircase worth of steep, aggressive, or is it just rock faces that you have to scramble over? Kind of tying that back is AI promise transformation. Hey, the way we do business is going to fundamentally change. And what does that actually look like for different companies? It's not, it's not either hype or failure. There are real practical things of, let's say you now have access to, companies now have access to unbelievable executive assistants. I've used the intern portion a lot, but I think I want to promote that a little bit to executive assistant because there's more and more that these things can do. Their capabilities are still a little narrow and are usually better when focused, but you also run into these real challenges of integration. So, hey, all right, my phone system now has an AI. Does this talk to anything that my ops manager has? There's now a receptionist. Is that tied into sales and marketing to talk about what we're doing recently? You have some of these same, how do you make sure that the left hand's talking to the right hand to get pieces moving along? And how do you measure if something's successful? If you're like, okay, I'm throwing $1,000 a month at cloud subscriptions for all my employees, how do I actually measure whether or not that's getting productivity gains? Or has it just now, have I paid $1,000 a month for my employees to actually just, do 2 hours of work in an 8 hour day? How do you actually measure that? And then the governance. If more information, more context is better for folks, how do you make sure the guardrails are there that, hey, we have this awesome project cost calculator and labor is a part of it. And it turns out that, hey, I didn't put good guardrails that now folks can ping my project pricing system to figure out the compensation of other employees. Now you got an HR system problem on your hands. So you have these different, we all have access to these different data as we're building these different tools. So how do you put the guardrails? How do you make sure that you're actually getting out of it what you want? And I'm sure I don't really have to hammer home the concept that the promise of these AI tools is enormous. We're watching the Fortune 500s do unbelievable investments in this. The 2025 capital spending by the big five, $412 billion, billion with a B. You've got the capability, I mean, the arms race between the Chinese models and the American models. Anthropic comes out with Opus 5. ChatGPT releases 5.6 Soul. DeepSeek overseas releases something. I know a couple groups I'm in have you know, try and keep an eye on who's the top 10. But I mean, really, rather than saying, hey, which car has the best horsepower, I think it matters way more. Hey, how good of a driver around the track are you? Who cares if it's 700 or 800 horsepower? Can you actually hit your turns as a driver? And for small business and the local firms, we don't need to copy hyperscaler spending. It's just being really intentional about what that next dollar is supposed to improve. And this is the case for organizations for technology, regardless of the AI world or not. But it is advanced faster than most organizations have learned how to integrate, govern, and measure it. And this is true for any type of tool system that somebody might have. I mean, it's even if there is a central platform that somebody uses for most of their day-to-day work. Maybe everything is done in Salesforce. Maybe everything, in my world, there's something called a professional services automation, a PSA. You actually use all the features that software companies coming up with try and help you do things better, faster, stronger. And how do you integrate it, govern it, and make sure that it's actually getting you what you want on the other side? So that promise is enormous. You can't just really throw money at the problem to make it work. So, all right, what does the rest of the territory look like? If we have to be intentional about our spending and we have this big problem, how many businesses out there are actually using it? And the following comes from the Federal Reserve Board monitoring AI adoption in the U.S. economy from beginning of April 2026. So the data's 4 months old, could be a lot different, but this is a mere 4 months ago that 18% of U.S. firms back in April were reporting AI use in at least one business function. 41% of workers reported using work-related generative AI use, and 78% of workers at firms whose executives report some form of AI adoption. So you have all these different scales, the firm level, the worker level, employment type weighted, executive reported surveys, all answer different questions, but it's not rather really a question at this point of are we using AI? Because frankly, if you're in the networked world, it's showing up because we saw the investments that the big five made earlier. It's inevitable that they're gonna make it that's how we interact with them. But it really becomes that question of where, how often, and to what result is someone using AI? Is it that we're using it for call transcriptions to make sure that we understand what folks are saying on the phone for quality control? Are we using it for improving our web pages to make sure that marketing is keeping up and somebody's reviewing the website to make sure that I don't have conflicting information in different parts of the website? There are, is it something that you're taking data aggregation that would normally take hours, may take 2, 3 hours for someone to make a spreadsheet and then report on it to say, hey, how are we doing? What are these metrics for what's going on? So if we've got 18% of US firms using it as of 4 months ago for some form of internal deployment, 41% of workers. So that's an interesting one too. 18% of firms report it, 41% of workers. So sure, there can be some differences in survey methods there, but I've seen overwhelmingly for a lot of companies that they have no central AI policy. There's no acceptable use policy. There's no discussion about controls. There's some loose, oh, don't, yeah, you wouldn't want your employees posting your information on Reddit, but if you're using a free version of ChatGPT or something, kind of doing the same thing. But firms kind of got around that and said, oh, well, folks should just pay for their own license and then go from there. But now you have these folks using all these different tools, almost like, they're conducting business for the company through their personal mailbox. So if that person leaves, you have zero control over whatever was in there, and you have zero insights into what they might be saying or working on. Nothing wrong with employees having their own personal AI subscriptions for doing meal preps at home or helping them navigate trying to figure out elder care services or who's the best estate planning attorney for them or any of those personal life questions. But when it comes to your firm and your firm's information, you want to be able to have a degree of control of it. And speaking of that control, that kind of comes into the spending. I mentioned earlier about, does a company want to throw $1,000 a month at OpenAI subscriptions or Claude subscriptions or anything like that? But coming from a March 2026 survey from the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, the median AI spend in a 2 to 99 employee survey was about 2,200 bucks. That's annual, which means that it's barely 200 bucks a month in subscription. So, I mean, thinking at least for OpenAI, ChatGPT work is 20 bucks a month. So that could be a 10-person company where everybody in the company has just ChatGPT subscription. There's no API calls or any of the crazy stuff under the hood. But, looking at, there is no real easy normal AI budget. In the IT world, it was really easy to say, oh, the IT spend for a firm is typically 1 to 3% of top line revenue as should represent 1 to 3% of your top line revenue as a percentage. And then if you are in any type of regulated space, healthcare, financial, anything related to the DoD, that goes from 3 to 6. Then it becomes 3 to 6% of top line revenue. So those numbers are kind of big, but that technology spend can move into questions of like, all right, these are my Microsoft licenses, these are my computers, these are cybersecurity services, backup, et cetera, et cetera. But since everything in this world is so new, there's no normal budget. There's no X percent. Could it be that for one firm, it might be fine to just toss it at, say, all right, here's where everybody's going to get a Claude subscription. Okay, cool. Maybe it's okay, you're going to get cloud subscriptions, and we're going to use this third-party consultant who's going to build us something for, doing an internal knowledge chat system and service coordinator. And in building that, we're going to then, that's going to be $1,000 a month because, now there's Amazon hosting costs and API tokenization and, the expertise to build it. So that really the lesson is just there is no normal yet. And you have to think of what are the results that you're looking for? Is there something that you want to augment? Is there something that you want to, is there a workflow that you want to change and improve that something's just taken a long time, or there's data you're not getting that's inhibiting your decision making? Are you fighting those client expectations of Amazonification where everything now needs to be same day? I have a decision and the thing should be on my doorstep. Is it a question of pricing? Hey, labor is my largest cost. I got a lot of knowledge workers. I have to figure out that if my average person could take care of 200 folks, they need to take care of 300 folks at the same price now because in what we're doing, clients can't stomach a 15 to 20% price increase because everybody's got it kind of rough. So pricing, budgets, all over the place. There is no clear answer. So AI success really begins when something in the business becomes measurably better. And better is up to you. I think a big thing for us is we understand time is our most precious resource for being a professional services team. And time spent generating reports that are really important, whether they are the technology business report of telling clients the current status of their IT, whether it's reports on how the service desk is doing, whether it's reports on project services, profitability, employee performance, service KPIs. Are these settings and things set up across all clients? All these things are important. And if it takes someone 6 hours to do something and we instead get that down to 1, that's better. We have a huge amount of time saved. So that measurement portion is what's important for us. And our main metric is not necessarily a cost savings, although sometimes to a degree, if it can replace a specific software package or something like that, sure. But we overwhelmingly, at least on the operations side, look for cost savings. So actually, this is a good point too, because I know, Ryan, you've built a lot of things internally. So for when you're working on a lot of the marketing stuff, and especially when you're using the AI platforms, how do you measure better?
A lot of it is we have our Google performance metrics. Obviously, I think that's been our biggest change is seeing how individual site performance and ranking is going. Like we went from not ranking at all with a bunch of towns to now we're showing up on page one for Quincy, for Plymouth, for all these towns where we weren't. Like we were just like running so far behind because so much of it is based on local. And a lot of that's just been the ability to put out volume. And then the rest is time tracking. Because if I say, like, okay, it took me when I first started, and we were redoing a lot of our collateral. It's like, okay, it would take me 3 weeks to redo our IT buyer's guide, and now I can do that in like one third the time, just because ChatGPT can go through and rewrite. All I have to do is read and edit.
Yeah, perfect. I didn't even tell him to say that. And something that other folks might use, and especially, kind of to these points, we're talking about these time savings, we're talking about these outcomes. And, I'm not measuring Ryan by how many tokens did he use? Did he burn his usage limit? Hey, how many prompts have you punched in? Adoption is not really integration to the workflow, but it's really that question again of just what has it fixed in the employee's life? Ryan doesn't have to take 3 weeks to edit a document. You can get going faster with it. My service coordinator doesn't have to spend 3 hours pulling the service KPI report. It uses real-time metrics and we can have them timed together for just discussing the metrics and moving through it. So, a mere 7% of firms saying AI is fully integrated. I'm wondering from that 7% of firms that reported how many of them are lying. Because like any technology thing, there's always hiccups, there's always gaps. But 18% of professional services respondents who say a form of ROI is tracked. And I think that's a huge one. Just can you actually see the measurable, okay, here's another good one for adoption is not integration. We had a knowledge chat built that integrated our documentation system, our ticketing system, and some policies from a consultant. You have the policies from the consultant was hundreds of pages. Really no way for my technicians to sit down, read through, and digest them all without putting them through some form of college course. The ticketing system, if they didn't work on it, they might not have the context of what was done to get it fixed. And then even in the documentation, even though the documentation is well structured and laid out, these are human beings. They don't like to read. So they might not actually go to the documentation to see what it is. But having a service coordinator chat that then allows them to ping and say, hey, I've got this issue with this client, any insights is unique. But then, are they actually, is my service coordinator seeing a cut down in how many tickets get escalated up to him? It's a good thing to measure. And even in these measurements, these are experiments. This isn't like moving to generally acceptable accounting practices and then boom, hey, we got a well-trodden 100-year-old process for tracking how money should flow. This is all new, but great starting points, especially of, hey, I know I have to stay competitive. I know I have to adopt these tools. Where do I start? Marketing copy is a fantastic starting point. I mean, Ryan gave some stories of rewriting the web pages, winds up being really easy once you get access to it. And, you could really tune it to your voice to be able to put everything out. And might date myself a little bit here, but if you spend a lot of time trying to write HTML to get your MySpace page to look cool, the AI is a little better at that. You can save some headache and frustration by just using plain language to say, I don't like that blue. Make it more Duke blue, something like that. But even still, with those time measurement pieces, keep an eye on those ROI metrics, especially in professional services. So, yeah, a great thing to hammer home the point. Activity versus value. Hey, everybody has Copilot, everybody has ChatGPT. Awesome. Well, where do you actually see that outcome? Like, yeah, Ryan has ChatGPT and Copilot. Excellent. You know, but hey, Google went from page 3 to page 1. Proposal turnaround went from 3 days to 1.5. Webinar slides went from 2.5 weeks to 2.5 weeks to 2.5 days. Now you can see hey, these starting to see these time savings. And those individual time savings aren't automatically organizational productivity, but and you have to make sure that you adopt pieces of the workflow to change around the tool. Because if you have something where in the workflow that you have around the tool, you know, if something is generating, you can't just rubber stamp it and throw it. You got to make sure that things are tracking accordingly. That, hey, work is getting checked.
So that it's like a productive thing and not just like, because hey, hitting the button and making an interactive widget on the website is fun, but like also it's tied to engagement and bounce rates with the website, which are tied to, further performance metrics that keeps it higher on the page. Like,
Absolutely. So if we're looking for those first projects, there are four things you're going to want to look for. Is it frequent? Is it structured? Is it reviewable? And is it measured? So is this something you're doing monthly, weekly, daily? Are you going to the same places every time to get the information? Can you look at it pretty quickly and tell if something is way off base or way on base? And is it very easy to see before and after numbers? So some statistics about what things are better, but frequent, structured, reviewable, measured. That if you had just a little bit more of programming knowledge, you probably could have got it done. So with that, those four, measure the workflow and not the demo. So measure how you're trying to get the data. Is it, a clever prompt is just a possibility, not a good business case. You want a repeatable improvement after review and correction. Hey, I built an agent that reviews the website. Hey, it ignores this, or to your point, keeps getting hell bent on shipbuilding, where that really only applies to like two or three towns. You're looking for something that, you're looking for results based on some net impact. You don't want to do a one-off demo. I was like, oh, I had an AI agent review my website once. Okay, what if this is something that Ryan should be doing on a regular basis, that looking at keeping the Google page results up? Or hey, maybe we do all this stuff and the measurable on the other side is our rankings tank because then Google says, I can smell the AI generated on it and I hate this. Okay. Now, do you have some method of measuring it on the other side? And especially risk, is there something where you start putting so much AI stuff on your website to the point that Google completely suppresses your results instead of liking it? So thinking through quality, the time, what your experience with the work is, and then just that, I think that risk portion in the end is just really important. So I want to go into some of the case studies. So we've talked a little bit about, what does success look like? How do you actually measure these pieces? So let's go into what we've actually tried. So the first one is tracking service desk key performance indicators and the technician performance. So this was my job. I handed it off to a technician. And so the problem that we had is what friction did we notice? We saw our service coordinator spending 3 hours a week pulling spreadsheets from three systems to update a master spreadsheet. 3 hours every Tuesday. He's not doing anything else but pulling reports. Why might AI help? It can connect to the necessary web pages that hold the data. We already had documents that outlined how we calculated our KPIs with sources and where to find the information. And this was really just automating the calculation beyond download, spreadsheet, interpret, and update. What did we test? We used a combination of ChatGPT Codex and Claude Code on a dedicated machine in the office to create a website dashboard and get it to mimic our spreadsheets so that it looked the same and we could tell very quickly and that measurable and reviewable whether we were on or off. What changed? Gave the service coordinator 3 hours back in their day. We had the ability to look real time at service desk and performance instead of you know, looking back to identify pacing for the technicians, helped inform project scheduling based on service desk needs, and identified staff burnout based on work volume and what channel it was coming from. And our lesson learned at the end of it, we adopted it, we revised it slightly to add more features as we went along for what we needed, and it's still a work in progress because even in calculating spreadsheets, there's still things that you can pull off. And I'm happy to be able to show it that based on nothing too crazy fancy here in the office. I have it. That is the IP address of a machine here in the office. Hint, you can only get to it if you're here in the office. But, we're tracking things like some of these things aren't built out all the way yet. So like, for example, centralized services is something we're still working on. There's a stale snapshot. There's still stuff to fix. But for services KPIs, yeah, 6 are off target. What are we looking at for last week? hey, two tickets made it over for last week. We only one-shotted 50%. There's 44 tickets open on the desk. 40% of them came by phone call. We resolved most of them in a half an hour. Took us about an hour and 15 minutes to get to folks. Didn't like that. Tickets didn't stay open too late, but folks were really working hard for it. So this to me tells me pretty quickly, hey, last week was a rough week. And now I didn't have to have my nose in the ticketing system the whole time to figure this out. Matter of fact, I was on a hike, and this tells me that there's some grumpy clients out there. I'm gonna know why. Things weren't, it was a rough week. But this pulls from, this required no programming information. It just punched some prompts into ChatGPT, gave it some connections to the ticketing system and the review system, and pulled this information out pretty quickly. It's great. Yeah, and so now it's something I use as a management layer over my current tools to be able to run the business. The next thing we tried was a call transcription and ticket note web page. So for what friction we noticed is that after answering a service call, ticket was generated with a recording, but the techs had to rush off. But sometimes techs would rush off to the next call or they were up next. So sometimes the work they did and any next steps weren't captured because they fixed it, got off the phone and went to the next thing. And, service coordinator and myself are going around going like, hey, what's going on here? So why might AI help? Well, call transcriptions, natural AI use. Phone vendor had it, and nice call transcriptions, but is buried multiple menus deep. Couldn't really get to it, but phone company has no problem attaching the MP3 file to the email. So we could use that recording to just capture what was done and then put ticket entries in on behalf of the technician to save them time, be able to cover and move and, help with our company value of, yeah, cover and move. So what did we test? We use Claude Code on a dedicated machine in the office, create a website that the techs can upload a file. It runs a whisper transcription, pushes ChatGPT's API for a ticket entry to be able to provide a copy and paste summary. So what changed? Ticket response times improved dramatically as the phone call tickets were updated almost instantaneously, meaning the average response time to an answered phone truly reflected the 0 minute response time of a, hey, we got it, we answered it. So what was the lesson? Hey, we adopted it, revised it slightly to add more features as we went along for what we needed. Sometimes there were batch things that you had to go along for. So same deal, Claude Code. It's on a dedicated machine in the office. You can upload multiple batches or a single file, and it will give you a transcript with a nice little copy to clipboard button, and you can drop that transcript in wherever you need it. Real simple local hosted thing that took something that the phone system didn't do and made it faster and better. And, again, we saw it quickly in those, average response time averages went from 128 minutes where we were looking at those first updated tickets, and then that went down to the 74 that you see currently. So this is the real secret because for a lot of companies, you will have maybe an owner who's a little bit of time on his hands that starts to get these tools, starts to play around with them a lot, and is now saying like, "Oh, I built this tool, I built this thing, I built this thing." And your employees are like, "Yeah, that's great." And they don't do anything with it. And it's the same as if you went out and bought a software package and said, "Hey, I had this whiz bang demo. You should try this new software package." And the employee actually does the work, goes like, "That's great. I don't have time to learn how to do this thing." So you want an AI champion where it's an employee who's closest to the work that if you are to build a tool, you want the person who swings the hammer to come up with the hammer. They know what sucks about the hammer better than the foreman who hasn't swung one in a hot minute is. So for us internally, we spotted, I've got a few AI champions. Ryan is one for specific to a lot of the marketing work that he comes up with a lot of tools, and there are certain things that I see and I pass to him and I see if the tool actually adopts or not. Um, and then on the other side, the service coordinator is another AI champion. And a big part of it was they know the work, they can do the work, They're curious. They ask good questions. I can see, continuous education. They can be trusted. So I can give them access to things that'll go harder, better, faster, stronger, especially in the face of clients without having to be worried about something coming off the rails. They have an appropriate degree of skepticism that they know if they are being duped. They are good at writing down the process for what it is that they did. So, one thing Ryan was really good at when he first came in was going, this folder structure sucks. I'm going to make this documented so it looks better. That was great. And they have no problem of running up issues up the chain of command if, there is a risk or a limit and there's a like, hey, wait a minute, this might not be a good idea. So that champion needs to be a bridge between the employees, management, and then we're lucky internally. We are our own IT, but you also want to bump this stuff by the IT people to make sure that you're not unlocking a door that you didn't mean to unlock. And you want the best champion to make success less dependent on a single person, that it is only through their incredible effort that this thing does, not like, hey, if this person isn't here, all this stuff is immediately lost. You really want to see where someone is building a system that allows the team to be, the tool is not something that like, oh my God, Matt, if Matt goes away, I'm going to have no idea how the call transcription system works. No, we have a cover and move so that if something happens, somebody else knows how to step in and pick up the project. And you want champions to run the learning loops. You don't want them to build a tool, run off, and call it a day. You know, they want to notice, test, measure, document, share. Because before something starts getting picked up adoption, oh, this is a great tool. And all of a sudden now we're really depending on this learning thing. You want to make sure that if it all gets burnt down, you have a way to come back from it. And this is the same for any process in your company. Hey, if all of a sudden the billing email goes down, do we have another method of being able to communicate with clients for billing questions or anything like that? So the champion should know pain points, pick a nice bounded test that they won't blow anything up. So with our ticketing system, we wanted to make sure we had something where, in pulling information, it wasn't going to delete or overwrite or communicate with clients in any way that we didn't like. We want to follow data rules that, hey, this type of stuff is sensitive, stays within the company. Hey, this didn't work. Hey, this didn't work. Capture those failures, document a repeatable version, and then in what's there, repeat that, share that system that actually works. And again, you want to not have the champion where you are just throwing gasoline on the fire of a single clever key employee. You want a process that the business can repeat that, hey, what Ryan was able to do in marketing can apply to operations and another champion can pick this up. Or, hey, this champion is now, they won Powerball and they're going to depart. Can someone else pick up where they left off with little, speed bumps in the process? And it's not one of these without having some type of warning, but curiosity needs a safe place to operate. An AI champion is not the person in the office who has like six different tools and they've got Grok and they've got Claude and they got ChatGPT and they got an OpenSeek and they're running a local llama and they're just taking the data and giving it to all six of the different tools and whatever answer they like the best, they're going to take that one. And they're a lone cowboy who's the only one who understands the workflow of how they got from point A to point B. You don't want that. You don't want that person. You want the person that just they understand that how everything's set up needs to be packaged in such a way that you can hand it to the next person. And that's true of just, I mean, and the dirty secret here is this is nothing new. Any good business process should be in such a way that it doesn't depend on one single person's heroics to be able to get what you need. And this is a great statistic. 28.6% of subject matter experts that use generative AI had a staff guideline of some form. And you don't want to ban curiosity. You don't want to look at these tools, fear it, and then say, no. You want to have the appropriate guide. You want to just put in no uncertain terms, shout out to Helene Horn Figman for all the wonderful employee handbooks and staff guidelines of just, you want to put the rules in black and white. Have an acceptable use policy. And certain things that you might think are assumptions should be explicitly stated. Like, hey, we give you a laptop for work. It should be used for work purposes. Like, wonderful generic term, but what are work purposes? What are not work purposes? So, okay, we give you this AI subscription. What are the do's and don'ts? Hey, you're allowed to use Claude and ChatGPT. Maybe there's a list of specific AI tools that are approved. And having a conversation, say, hey, this is the policy for the tools you want. If you bump into a tool that suddenly is like, hey, I started using whatever and it blew the doors off of Claude, awesome. Have the conversation to say we tested it, looks good. IT gave it a thumbs up. Let's add it to the acceptable use policy. Or, hey, if we're going to use generative AI in following contract review, let's just be really explicit of saying like, hey, I got this non-disclosure agreement. I ran it through ChatGPT and I referenced the following documents. And here's what maybe if you're doing contract review where overall contract review is prohibited by your acceptable use policy, maybe there's some guidelines for how it should be done. And so just, the having a champion is not going to skyrocket that everybody has their own personal subscription or somebody's running some crazy local model. The champion helps channel into, hey, this is the way we do it because this is how it's repeatable, scalable, and not dependent on a single person. So how do you choose that right first trail? What's that first AI project that you should tackle? It's one with a clear value, manageable risk, measurable improvement. The easiest one to think of is what's something that you do every day, every week, every month. That sucks. That takes a lot of time because if you get time back, that's usually good value. And if all of a sudden, when the AI tools are hooked up to it, they're not going to delete everything. They're not going to email clients and say something nasty or give you conflicting information that, hey, what is this thing I do on a regular basis that takes hours that if I gave the AI connection to it, it's not going to burn it all down. For us, that's service KPI dashboard. For others, it might be hey, this is trying to think of something that would be for attorneys or
Hmm.
accountants or something like that. But maybe it could be hey, actually, I'll use a CPA. Maybe you have something for a CPA that you're at a point where you're not as mature to, you're not at the point where you're like super mature to have like a CRM where you're really tracking that like outbound sales of like, hey, okay, I need to see whatever. Maybe it's something that every week you have an AI thing that is tracking which clients have you not talked to in 2 to 3 months and just gives you a list on Monday to say, hey, here's the 15 people you should give a call to this week just to say, hey. And then maybe that's something that you should do. It's good for your business. It generates referrals. It keeps client retention, but you just Monday morning hits, the new fire hits, and you have not done the email review thing because you got distracted. Maybe just having that one little list of 15 folks gives you measurable values of, hey, I got this thing, and my referrals went up from 2 a month to 5 a month. Excellent. So again, you're asking like, where is that work unnecessarily difficult? Why is it so difficult to figure out who haven't I talked to in 3 months? And how long does a full workflow of combing through your email take? Who touches it? How often does it happen? How much rework is normal? And, is there anything where a client or an employee feels like good friction, feels friction? So a good candidate is frequent, painful, structured, reviewable, measurable, low enough risk for a bounded pilot. That referral system for, hey, maybe there's something for if you follow Joe Polish and you like the whole 5 personal notes a day saying, hey, going through my emails for personal contacts, who are 5 people I should send personal notes to today? I won't say like, hey, use the AI to write the personal note, actually do the work, make it sound like you, but at least the AI could help you figure out what 5 folks you should say hi to today. Then test and measure. Do that one workflow. Do that one tool impossible. A review. The AI doesn't have to send the emails for you. Maybe the workflow is just, hey, I have that list of the 10 people I need to talk to this week. See if there are any failures or corrections. Maybe it keeps giving you the same guy every week, and you're like, hey, what is this? Why does this keep happening? And then make sure you measure. What's the cycle time? Are there quality, are there rework escalations? Are you actually getting capacity by doing this? Is this a good experience, or is there now a new bottleneck of like, well, I already had no time, but now I have to sit here and find time to make 10 phone calls. When in reality, hey, you should be doing it. And especially too, failure is an option. It's an experiment. And what did Edison famously say? I didn't just find a way to make a light bulb, I found 1,000 ways to not to. These are experiments. You're trying to figure out something to use a tool to be able to do something better. So, cost, when do you actually lean the investment into whatever the tool that you're doing? Oh, hey, figure out that what it actually is going to take to blow this up from, okay, I internally did something for reviewing what 10 people I should talk to today. Well, what if you have a sales team of 5 to 10 people? What is it going to take to have them figure out, that this is doing it for everybody? And now you've got 50 people calling 10 people, meaning 500 people a day. What is that going to cost in subscriptions? Is there training for employees to read the report and figure out what's there? What does IT have to do to be able to give the appropriate permissions and make sure that there isn't something that's going to block it? Is there another integration that maybe you do have a CRM? Maybe you do have your email and you're trying to get them to talk better, and now you can bring context in from different systems. And is there something in the human review oversight for making sure that the information that's coming in is what you want? And again, don't just take what someone else spent. Use your test results and your operational needs to determine how much you want to spend on it. And for guardrails, use the approved stuff. Don't usually if you pay for it, it's usually pretty safe. Make sure the box is checked for, don't train on my data. Make sure there are explicit lists for what data is allowed to go in and what's not. Make sure there's a good spot that a human comes in to review before all of a sudden something may leave the company or may leave an internal system. Um, understand where something's really risky, like don't have your AI just pick who gets raises that year based on scores. Is there something in the loop to figure out that if I depend on this too much, I might get in trouble? And then, hey, who's going to make the policy decision if something is really out of bounds? This AI is brand new, but it's not a legal vacuum. There are still privacy concerns, data security, consumer protection, and anti-discrimination rules still matter. And, an AI leak, I mentioned about the compensation thing earlier, that's still real. And you've got hey, don't put the fun stuff up into ChatGPT. Maybe you are in an area where somebody is able to build a internal model where technically it's an LLM that is completely contained and is not going to a data center that you can't walk over and put your hand on it. All depends. So every AI test should end with a decision. Do you adopt it? Hey, this is good. Let's go for it. Do you revise it? It's promising, but it's not saving that much time. It saves 15 minutes. So, okay. Is it pause? Yeah. Hey, conditions aren't ready yet. Maybe if this software platform that we use opens up an MCP server, then that agent will be ready. Or abandon. Hey, yeah, sure, this will save us, it would be great to be able to have it automatically install patches, but you know, there may be some concerns about cost or hosting something that you're not supposed to have there. So for that seventh step, that first AI win, you're not trying to all of a sudden become a 3-person team that punches like 40. You're picking one thing to improve, just one. A recurring process that's frequent, painful, measurable, reviewable, and low risk because it doesn't leave the business. Establish a baseline. Hey, this is what it currently takes. It takes 3 hours to pull this report. We need the KPIs because it tells us blah, blah, blah. You sign a champion. Hey, this person tech savvy, pretty good with it. Good way to think about it. I trust them. I know that they're going to escalate things and I know they're not going to go crazy. Run a bounded test. I'll let it see this data, but not this other data. Measure what changed. Hey, were they making better reports? Did it save them a lot of time? And then make a decision. Do you adopt it, revise it, pause it, or abandon it? It's not just, you're not a man with a hammer looking for nails. Yeah. AI is a tool. Is it a tool that can be used effectively? So last question I leave before we depart is just what's one process in your business that, something that you do again, repeatable and painful that AI could improve without adding a giant stack of unnecessary risk. That something that it's not going to affect how you talk with clients. It's not going to, in our case, start uninstalling people's files or something like that. So it's something to think about. And that's all I have for today. Ryan, any thoughts?
No, I think definitely finding people that are already using AI in the organization and giving them a framework to say, like, okay, this is what you're doing. Let's figure out how to measure that success is a great way to just jumpstart everything and then start repeating that through the rest of the office. Because obviously, if one person's doing something and you have more than one person in that role, is that product going to be able to help everyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Immensely appreciate it. But hope everyone has a fantastic summer. Be interesting to see. I mean, especially here today. I mean, a lot of the principles are not that different from any time there was a new way of thinking or way of doing something to implement in a business. That's the dirty C is this AI tool just allows
Yeah.
processes to speed up. It really kind of goes to that fundamental, how do you how to use the process, how do you work within it? How do you adopt it? It's those fundamentals are no different than if you read a whiz bang, you read
Yeah.
traction and you're trying to go like, okay, I read traction, I got my VTO, I'm doing, it's all the same stuff.
It's all tools and it's all evaluating them and seeing them in that context.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you for the next one.
Right, ready?